Hey, aloha, and welcome to another exciting Stan the Energy Man on ThinkTech Hawaii. Stan Osserman here, and I'm really excited about today. I've been working this this drug deal here for probably 2 or 3 weeks with our guest secretary and public relations person to get him on, but he's so busy. We had a hard time scheduling because his calendar's so busy, but he's one of my favorite guests, and I've known him for probably 4 or 5 years and listened to him talk publicly several times at big conferences. And he's a force to be reckoned with in the hydrogen world, and runs one of the, I'd say, arguably the largest producers of hydrogen equipment, fuel cells, and even electrolyzers that make the hydrogen for the fuel cells in the industry. So my guest today is Mr. Andy Marsh from a company called Plug Power. And I guess I have to do a truth in lending, or at least make it known that I actually have stock in Plug Power now. I've been telling people to buy Plug Power stock for years, and I never did myself until a couple months ago. So I do have money in his company, but that's not why he's on. He's just a wealth of knowledge and information on hydrogen. So Andy, thanks for being on the show today, and thanks to Sarah for helping set everything up.
Well, aloha, Stan, and it's great to be here. Last time I was here was New Year's Eve 2018, and I also own stock in Plug Power. So as a disclaimer.
I'm glad to hear that. Hey, I wanted to start off by asking you, how has the recent pandemic impacted your company?
Sure, that's it. When we look at the company, Stan, our customers, we're primarily, our biggest portion of our business is helping our customers move goods in their warehouses. Fortunately, our two biggest customers, Walmart and Amazon, have had record years during the pandemic. When you think about Walmart, about 33% of groceries in the US were actually provided by Walmart. And I think everybody knows home deliveries, Amazon's the leader. So during the pandemic, we've moved actually 30% of the food in the United States. And we've had a record second quarter where we achieved over $72 million in gross billings. And we're about to have a knockout third quarter where we're going 40% higher, between $110 to $115 million in gross billings and $10 million of EBITDA. So we're actually, during these difficult times, my teams just have been performing. I have a great deal of respect for everything they've done.
That's outstanding to hear. For the other viewers, I know what you guys do, but why don't you explain a little bit about what Plug Power does as a core competency, and what your management theory is, or your leadership theory is, on hydrogen, and where you want to take your company.
Sure. So Stan, we're a much different company than when we spoke in 2018. Now, our primary business, which we developed, was provide fuel cells for forklift trucks in large distribution centers, as well as in manufacturing facilities. What we found when we talked to customers, that we really needed to provide a total system solution. Customers didn't know what to do if they just bought a fuel cell. So we had to build hydrogen infrastructure. We had to be able to provide the hydrogen. We had to provide the fuel cells, as well as the aftermarket service, where we leverage the Internet of Things, as well as artificial intelligence. So today, we've actually, into that space, have shipped over 35,000 fuel cells. We've built 100 hydrogen fueling stations. You see the stats now on the screen. And every day, we're dispensing 30 tons of hydrogen, which is the most of anyone in the world for fueling. During that time, we've really developed some core technology, from the fact that we are the largest manufacturer of MEAs in North America. We are the largest manufacturer of stacks. So we have this rich technology set, which we're using to drive into equipment for on-road vehicles, for large-scale power systems. They can provide megawatt level power for activities like data centers. So a huge business is being developed from those core technologies to move in other applications. Back in May, we really made our big push into hydrogen. At our seminar back in September, we said that by 2024, we would be generating over 40 tons of green hydrogen. So in the last 3 months, not only did we buy the first company in the world that ever built a large-scale hydrogen plant, which was United Hydrogen, we bought the leading electrolyzer technology company in the world, Giner EOX. So now, not only are we a technology company, we're also an energy company. And it really differentiates Plug Power versus the competition. We can bring you an end-to-end solution. And the guests look behind me, if they can see, that's a Plug Power liquid hydrogen delivery truck.
All right.
So it's, that can deliver 2,500 to 3,000 kilograms of hydrogen on one delivery. Plug Power, has 9 of those running around the road, and we're going to be building additional plants and having a lot more trucks and vehicles on the road to support our customers.
When I hear you explain how you've grown in the last 2 years, it reminds me of Nikola Motors, and he's known for building hydrogen trucks. But when you talk to him, he says, I'm not a truck manufacturer, I'm an energy salesman. And he says his company's model is based around selling hydrogen energy, not around building trucks. And his theory is, I could make $30,000 on every truck that I make that I sell for, $500,000, but I only make it once. But if I sell the hydrogen for those trucks year round, year after year, for year, decade after decade, he goes, now then I'm making some money. So his whole business model sounds like yours: bring the chicken, bring the egg, and grow both of them. And that seems to have been the stumbling block for hydrogen for many years. Is you could bring the vehicles, but if you didn't have the hydrogen, nothing happened. Or you can bring the hydrogen, but without the vehicles or the forklifts or whatever, nothing happened. Well, you were one of the cutting edge companies to bring both the hydrogen and the product of the forklifts or material handling equipment to the customers that do 24/7 ops, where they really can benefit from the technology. And so that's how come I knew you guys had the right formula early on. You've thought about it pretty deeply, and you've obviously got the formula going forward. So I'd like to congratulate you on your concepts.
Well, thank you, Stan. I would say it's not only a concept. When you've built over 100 stations, when you're generating hydrogen for real, when you're moving products for over 500 million hours, that's a little bit more than just a concept. It's a reality. And I think that's what really differentiates us from any competitor in the marketplace.
That's true. And that brings up an interesting point. When you're on the front edge of a technology like you are, you have to be able to ramp up pretty quickly and get to scale pretty quickly. And there aren't a whole lot of folks out there that make all the components or make the equipment that you need. How have you handled that as a company?
That's a great question, Stan. And it really led us to move into vertical integration. If you really look at, for example, our fuel cell product, what we concluded was that to have a stack that met our performance requirements, to meet our quality requirements, as well as meet our cost requirements, I found we had to do it ourselves. So we acquired a small company in Rochester, New York, which was founded by ex-GM fuel cell engineers. And today we have a leading edge MEA manufacturing facility capability. We're about to build a gigafactory. We have folks competing for that business today. So what I found was that to be successful, to meet the quality standards, to meet the performance standards, so much of this we had to do ourselves. Of course, we have some good partners. I'll give you an example. PDC, which makes our mechanical compressors, located outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, has been a wonderful supplier to Plug Power over the years. And we developed a number of critical relationships. People who had similar visions about building out the hydrogen economy.
Well, you talked about Giner. You said you guys have acquired Giner. That's no small acquisition. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So Giner ELX had been doing electrolyzers, actually started over 47 years ago. The founder of the company was able to develop products that were used for NASA. Many of the satellites which float around the Earth today use Giner electrolyzers as well as Giner fuel cells. And what we found was that it was this small company from a manufacturing point of view. But if you talk to anyone at the Department of Energy, when I go to Europe and talk to my friends in Europe, they tell me Giner has the best stacks in the industry. The performance of our stacks from a current density point of view today exceeds the requirements that Europe is outlining for 2025. And within a year, will surpass their requirements for 2030. This is a great technology company. And we're marrying this with Plug Power's scale manufacturing, which will allow us to manufacture products in volume as well as reduce the cost dramatically. We've looked at the cost of the stacks already, and we can see that we can drive at least 45 to 50% of the cost out without taking the next step for technology improvements for current density. So the combination of their technology leadership, our scale manufacturing, and understanding of production techniques and supporting customers has been a marvelous combination. And this business will scale much quicker than anybody expects.
Well, you've got the material handling side down pat for sure. Are you looking at getting into grid and communication and transportation, hydrogen applications as well to expand your company?
So Stan, probably a little known fact is that we Plug Powers probably have done more systems for backup power systems for telecom than anyone else in the world. Today, it's not a large opportunity, but in the future, we think that business will expand. So let's think about that. We have a network with the Southern Company, which is in Alabama, Mississippi, where they have 500 of our backup power systems. But we're also, about a month ago, we made an announcement for large-scale power systems to provide backup power, as well as providing extra power during high electricity costs for the grid for peak power demands, with a backup power systems targeted for data centers and applications of that nature, which can provide up to 2.5 megawatts of power and can be easily scaled to larger systems. And what's interesting is essentially the same technology, the same components that we've used to build our material handling business can be leveraged into that application.
Andy, that's great to hear. And what I'd like to do is take a quick break now. And when we come back, I want to kind of expand our scope here out into Europe. So I know you've been a member of the Hydrogen Council, which is an international organization. And I'd like to get your thoughts on where the rest of the world is going in hydrogen. So we'll be back in 60 seconds to talk to Andy Marsh about where the rest of the world's going with hydrogen.
Aloha, I'm Krista Stadler, the host of Nonprofits Mean Business 2 on ThinkTech Hawaii. Nonprofits Mean Business 2 investigates the operational challenges and costs related to managing nonprofit organizations, while encouraging our viewers to find a nonprofit organization that you're passionate about in our community. We are streamed live on ThinkTech Hawaii bi-weekly at 12 p.m. on Thursdays. Thank you so much for watching our show. We look forward to seeing you then. Mahalo.
Hey, hello, and welcome back to Stan the Energy Man. Stan Osserman here with Andy Marsh from one of my favorite companies, Plug Power. And it's just amazing to hear how much his company has grown. But the other part of my relationship with Andy is back in, I think it was 2017 in September, an organization had its second meeting in New York City at the same time the UN Security Council was meeting. And the organization was a startup of an international consortium on hydrogen called the Hydrogen Council. I think when they started in January of 17, they probably had maybe a dozen or so members. And I think now they're up over 60 members. And that that growth of that council has pretty much paralleled the absolute growth of hydrogen in the industry. So Andy, you've been part of that since the beginning. And I'd like to get your insight on how the Hydrogen Council has impacted the hydrogen industry and the clean energy industry, and also what you see happening around the world related to your connections to the Hydrogen Council.
Sure. So Stan, there's actually 80 companies involved with the Hydrogen Council today. So it continues to grow. And you're right, I think it was 10 of us that were in Switzerland for the opening of the Hydrogen Council. And I think it was back in February of 2017. So it's been spectacular growth. And, you know, the kind of companies from large to small are members, people like Shell Oil and Toyota and Air Liquide, and companies which are just a few $1 million in revenue. And I think because, you know, when people look, I think the Hydrogen Council has done a wonderful job telling the world about how this could be a $2.5 trillion industry by 2050. And by 2030, especially when you look for electrification of certain technologies, hydrogen is actually the best solution. Let's take just a few examples why hydrogen is so exciting. We talked about trucking. So if you look at the energy density for long haul trucking, and you want to have a clean economy, carbon free, the only way to do that is hydrogen. If you talk to, for example, DHL, they say if you travel over 125 miles, all you're doing is carrying around batteries. You're not delivering goods. And so there's certain applications where hydrogen makes a great deal of sense. And I think the Hydrogen Council has done a great job marketing to the investment community, to governments, about hydrogen's place in helping countries meet the Paris Accord. Though the US is not, as you know, part of the Paris Accord today, it is driving behavior around the world. Take, for example, Europe, which coming out of this pandemic is really focused on how to invest in green technologies instead of old industries. And one of those green technologies is hydrogen. And quite honestly, that would not have been possible without the Hydrogen Council. Europe has an ambition to generate over 40 gigawatts of hydrogen via electrolysis by 2030, and another 40 gigawatts in Northern Africa. So when you look at policy, you look at directions, especially in Europe, there's a strong, strong commitment to hydrogen. And they believe, if you look at the European economic goals, hydrogen is a big part of the future. You see the same activity going on in South Korea. Hyundai is putting over 1,000 cars a month on the road in South Korea. China, as you know, has some real ambitious plans. In the Tokyo Olympics now in 2021, hydrogen will be featured by the Japanese government. So the United States, and you go around the world, Australia is thinking about how to export hydrogen. Activities, we're working on projects in New Zealand. There's lots of activities going on in South Africa, and Plug and many other people in this industry are deeply engaged in moving this green, clean, cost-effective technology. And by 2030, hydrogen in 9 or 10 applications will be more cost-effective than internal combustion engines today. So the future for hydrogen is certainly bright, and that's why I'm excited about Plug Power's future.
You mentioned something really important there, and that's the cost piece. The one downside of hydrogen that I've heard for years and years is it doesn't pencil out. It doesn't pencil out. But as time goes on, it's turning out it does pencil out. And could you explain how it's penciling out on the economic side? Because I can tell you, I really pushed the transportation piece hard. As a former aviator, I tell everybody when it comes to any kind of transportation, it's all about weight. Because the more weight you have to carry around, the less efficient you are. And so in aviation and space travel, you can see where hydrogen's already been in the space business for years, decades even, because of the energy density of hydrogen. And you're starting to see it in aviation where they're putting fuel cells into aircraft um, and they're doing it because of the weight issue.
So Stan, you'll have to have me on again. I can talk to you about aviation for a half hour. We have some interesting activities going on in that space. So
It's a
I would
it's a
love to
deal.
have a conversation on that subject. But let's talk about just the competitiveness of the hydrogen molecule and what's really driving that cost down. And I think most of your audience know that the cost of energy produced by wind or solar has dramatically decreased. And if you have solar power or hydropower or wind power at 4 to 5 cents a kilowatt hour, you can generate hydrogen, which is competitive with hydrogen generated by natural gas. When I look at it from a cost perspective, the Hydrogen Council, is targeting fuel in the cost of $1.50 to $2 a kilogram by 2030. And if you think about that, that's equivalent to 4 or 5 cents a kilowatt hour. You beat natural gas, you beat oil. Now, I read an article the other day in Bloomberg where the oil companies are really questioning whether they should be pulling more oil out, investing in pulling more oil out of the ground long term. You look at the projects going on like in the Falklands and in Canada, and people are beginning to say, does this make sense? Because technologies like hydrogen are going to be incredibly cost effective.
I think that's really
And for your audience, Stan, I would just suggest that they go to the Hydrogen Council website. And as members published a report in January 2020 this year that was called the Hydrogen Cost Roadmap. It's available for free, and it can talk about the areas where hydrogen will be competitive versus other technologies.
That's awesome. Thanks for that point out. I'd like to mention too that, right now the fossil fuel industry is going through some really strange gyrations that weren't predicted. And what I see happening on the US side is that fracking, especially small companies that were into either natural gas or oil fracking, they're starting to find out that they can't survive with this low energy price market and they're going bankrupt. That means the supply of cheap natural gas and cheap oil is dropping. They're also noticing that the fracking process is kind of tapping the most expensive fossil fuel that's available right now, and it's not lasting as long as they expected. That the wells are going dry faster than they anticipated. So the look for those fossil fuels staying competitive over the next 15 or 20 years is dropping because all the easy oil and easy natural gas have been had, and now it's all the tough stuff, at least in the United States, to get. So we're looking like hydrogen is a much more desirable outcome.
And I would also add that if you think about oil, if you think about natural gas, they're powering vehicles which are internal combustion engines. The cheap, I'm an electrical engineer by training. I went through the wireless revolution. I was working in wireless in 1983. Electric motors and electric engines are ultimately going to be more cost effective than internal combustion engines. So you're going to have these engines which are more cost effective. You're going to be able to power those vehicles with low cost electricity via renewables, which makes sense for many, many applications, or you're going to power those electric vehicles with hydrogen. And in all those cases, the total cost of ownership for hydrogen electric vehicles, as well as battery electric vehicles, are going to be much more cost effective than the total cost of ownership in cars. I believe the price of oil stocks, the price of natural gas stocks are going to go the same way as coal stocks. And you can see it when you look at the charts of those companies. There really hasn't been any increase in value for over a decade. And I think that trend's going to continue, and you're going to see the decline, or you're going to see them move into applications like hydrogen, opportunities of that nature when you look at announcements from folks like BP.
Well, Andy, this is we got 1 minute left, and I'm going to leave it to you to really give us a closing statement here on hydrogen, because you're the man. You're Mr. Hydrogen as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thanks, Stan. Well, I would tell your audience that probably back in 1985, they never thought that they would be walking around town with a wireless telephone, talking to somebody on the mainland. You're going to have the same feeling that you may be sitting there thinking, I'm never going to drive a hydrogen car. I believe you'll be driving a hydrogen car in the next decade. The advancements are rapid. And I went through the same experience. It was about 1991 where wireless felt like hydrogen today, and hydrogen and wireless 10 years later dominated the world, and we're heading in that direction with hydrogen.
Well, I can guarantee you, I'm going to be one of the first guys on your list to have a hydrogen car as soon as we can make it happen out here. So I want to thank you again, Andy, for taking some time out of a real busy schedule to be with us and sharing your thoughts. And I think it'll make a huge impact on whoever hears your words, because you know, your company has come a long way in the last few years, and it looks like it has a bright future. And I think a lot of people can learn from that, especially in these really changing times. So thanks again for being with us, and I hope to have you back on to talk aviation for a half hour sometime real soon.
I would love to. Thanks, Stan. Always a pleasure. Aloha.
Aloha. Take care. And
Okay,
for
bye.
our audience, we'll see you next week on Stan Energy Man. Aloha.